Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Now, with each passing day, we are looking at more and more indicators, and we can see there are some indicators that are just completely flashing red signals saying, warning, warning, we're in a recession or we're entering a recession. And it's following the same pattern that we saw back in 2007 moving into 2008. And we are getting many more indicators, and let me tell you, it's really starting to look very similar to what happened back in 2008. Now, ADP, they came out with their employment numbers, and it looks like they went ahead and they had to revise the May numbers. And when we look at the May numbers, they reported that there were about 253,000 jobs that were added, and they had to bring it down to 230,000, which probably most likely they will once again go ahead and revise those numbers once again. Now, it looks like the June numbers, it looks like the jobs have only come in around 158,000. They expected 188,000. And we can see there was no manufacturing jobs that were added. There were no gains during this month whatsoever. And we need to understand that a lot of these job numbers, even with ADP, we know definitely with the BLS, they are completely manipulated to basically paint this narrative that everything is fine in the job market. And we've been seeing jobs being let go left and right. I mean, retail is one of the biggest industries right now where jobs are just being shed like crazy. And we're looking at the automotive industry, and it looks like they are in a lot of trouble. Now, O'Reilly Automotive, their stock has crashed as much as 21%. And when we look at this, we can see that the auto parts retailer says that their same-store sales, well, they have completely missed the forecast for the second quarter. When we look at Advanced Auto Parts, they plunged 16%. AutoZone, they tumbled 10%. Standard Motor Products, they are down. And what we're seeing is that the auto part industry, well, it is crashing right now. Now, if we take this a step further and we look at the entire automotive industry, we can see that the automotive industry has been built on a gigantic illusion of debt. And what has happened here is for people to basically buy these cars, and actually they're not really buying them. They're taking out a loan on these cars, and many of these cars are leased. They're not even owning them, they're renting them. Well, this is how the auto industry got by. Now, when we look at this, we can see that things are slowing down dramatically. In fact, the overall industrial production is actually no higher today than it was in the fall of 2007. That means there has been zero growth in the aggregate industrial economy for a full decade. Real production in most sectors of the U.S. economy has actually shrunk, but has been partially offset by a 15% gain in auto production from the prior peak. Now, auto production, well, it's starting to decline now. So if this so-called recovery loses the automotive production that basically boosted up the entire economy, where will the growth come from? This is the big question, because it will completely collapse at this point. So let's think about all this for a second. How did U.S. households afford to buy their new cars when their incomes have lagged the purchase price of a new car by nearly 1/3 over the last 2 decades? Well, they didn't. Now, to finance an average new vehicle, it amounts to around $30,945, or 97.6% of the average purchase price. That's up 29% from the Great Recession, and shows quite dramatically how the Fed's bubble finance actually works. Now, since about 85% or so of new cars are financed, it means that households, they are taking out cash to finance the transaction fees, maybe pay off underwater loans or trade-ins, and we could see that they really don't have the cash to actually purchase these autos. And we know they continually lower the requirements for individuals to take out loans, the subprime, the subprime, anyone with a breath, they'll just allow anyone to take out a loan. Now, the Fed's survey shows that household sector is tapped out on auto credit, and that the auto loan demand has turned negative for the first time since 2008, 2009. Current paychecks are barely keeping up with inflation, and this means the auto industry, well, they are in trouble, and this is why we see car sales declining. And remember how car sales are calculated. When these cars are channel stuffed into the lots, that is considered a sale, not when they actually sell them to a person. Now, when we start to take a look at the entire economy, we can see that things are changing, not for the good, I hate to say, but things are rapidly deteriorating in the economy. And coming out of Moneyball Economics, this is Andrew Zeitlin, and he's using this Vice Index to basically look at the economy to see where it is headed. And it shows that the spending growth is continually slowing. In fact, in the latest month, it points to a contraction in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. Now, we're already slowing down in retail because we can see it. It's right in front of our eyes. Actually, if we go back in time, we've been looking at this and we've been watching it slow over time. And we can see that retail spending, well, it has dropped by 5.6% year over year. And this tells us that, guess what? People just don't have the extra funds. Now, according to this Vice Index, income growth has also slowed. So has personal consumption expenditures. And this is after gas price inflation has moderated. So when we look at this, we can see that compensation received year on year, it's continually declining. This is why we see the problem in retail. This is why we see the problem in automobiles. This is why we see the problem throughout the economy. When we look at revolving credit has rolled over. When did we see this before? That's right, prior to 2008, where consumer credit rolled over. And we're seeing the same thing happen right now. Now, the key takeaway from all of this is that we're seeing downturns across the board in most of the Vice Index data. And if we look at corporate tax revenues, we can see they're turning down. If we look at retail stores, they're closing, they're going bankrupt. Sales are declining. When we look at automobiles, that is declining. When we're looking at housing, that is declining. This is a signal that the economy is completely breaking down. And there's many other indicators. I mean, I can go on with this long list of many, many indicators showing that we are in big trouble here. And if we look back in time and we go throughout history, we can see that we're seeing a lot of the same exact economic indicators that we saw right before the system came down. And it finally reaches a point where, okay, the system is completely broke. People basically look at it and say, you know what? I don't believe in this system anymore. I don't believe that this is going to get any better. Many more people are out of work. Many more people can't find work. More and more retail sales stores are closing. The only thing that we don't see today are the breadlines, because the central bankers, the government, they figured that one out. Because think about it. If we took away food stamps today and we took away all these entitlement programs, we would see bread lines, soup lines. We would see people looking for places to live. We would see a lot of people on the streets, and these lines would be so long. Think about it. Right now, what is it, like 46 million people that are on food stamps? Think about the lines of people looking for food. It would be unbelievable. And people would wake up and say, wait, what's going on here? Why do we have this problem here? This doesn't make sense. This is what they saw back in the Great Depression. People knew there was a problem. Today, you really don't see that. They were able to hide all of this until the last minute. Now, this was done on purpose. Now, many people think, well, this was to help the people. It was to help them get by. No, it was to hide what was really going on. It was to hide that this central banking system doesn't really work. It was to hide all of this so they can steal as much wealth as possible, and no one realizes that things were going south until it was completely too late. Most of the people in 2008 didn't realize there were any problems until it was too late. And what was the percentage of people that lost their wealth? 38%? This time it's going to be much higher. Now, out in South Africa, they are in a recession. And the South African ruling Congress right now is proposing that the country's central bank, the Reserve Bank, be nationalized and wholly owned by the state. Now, of course, the central bankers are out there saying, listen, you can't do this. If you do this, your economy is going to get a lot worse. Well, this is what central bankers always say. If you decide to do anything against what we're saying, everything is going to get a lot worse, which actually is really the opposite. Things will get a lot better once the people take control of the banking system. But the central bankers, they really don't want this to happen, because remember, their entire company, their entire corporation, which these private Western central banks are, their product is debt. They deal in debt. And if you basically nationalize the banks and the people take control of the bank, guess what? You're controlling everything. And in today's world, once this global economy comes down, and if enough people wake up, we are going to see a lot more private central banks be nationalized, basically taken over by the people. And most likely what we need to do is get rid of the private Western central banks completely and let the people create their own currency. And they need to create the currency without interest attached. This is the big sticking point, because once you get rid of that interest, you get rid of a lot of the debt. Because now governments, they can issue a currency, there's no debt attached to it, and it can go out to the people, and the currency can actually have value. Now, if you take that and you attach it to maybe silver or gold, where there's checks and balances, well, then you have something even better. And this is why China and Russia, they've been accumulating a lot of gold, and they're continually accumulating a lot of gold, because they realize when the time comes, they're going to need that. They're going to use that gold. They're going to need that gold, because the dollar, it will be worth absolutely nothing. The dollar will no longer exist. It will not be the reserve currency of the world, and they're going to have to resort to something completely different. And throughout history, we've seen this happen, where there were reserve currencies of the world, and they cease to exist, and they are no longer the reserve currencies of the world. We're going to see the same thing happen once again. We've reached that time period where the global economy has reached a point where the central bankers, they've done as much manipulation as they possibly can. They can't do anything else. They're going to try. But what happens here, it doesn't matter about the stock market, it doesn't matter about anything else. When the individual people start to realize, and we're starting to see this throughout the world, this is why they're protesting at the G20, this is why we see protests out in Europe about the central banking system, because what happens is, as you continually push austerity on the people, and there are more and more individuals out of work, when the value of the currency continually declines, when the banking system starts to fall apart, and the world is smothered in debt, well, the people start to say, okay, this is enough. This is not working out for any of our economies. And people say, well, this is never going to happen. It already has. Countries are accumulating gold. People are accumulating gold and silver. You see the rise of the crypto market, where the emerging markets, these countries, are looking for a way to use the crypto market to transfer funds. They're using it to make purchases. You see it here in the United States. Yes, it's very young, but the reason why it was born was because people wanted something different. They wanted a system where it wasn't controlled by a central organization where they can manipulate everything. And this is just the beginning stages. And once this starts to grow and it gets bigger and bigger and more people look at this and they say, you know something? Why do we need the central bank? What are they doing for us? Does it really help the economy? Because the central bank is really doing the same thing as, let's say, the crypto market. They're creating currency out of thin air. The crypto market creates currency, what? Out of thin air. The central bank creates the currency with interest attached. The crypto market creates currency with no interest attached. The central bank controls that currency. The interest, the profits flow back into this corporation. The cryptocurrency, it's decentralized. It flows back to nobody because there's no interest attached. So we can see the movement has already started. And a lot of countries are going to say, you know something? Maybe we should be looking at this. Do we really need the central bank? Should we nationalize it? Maybe get rid of it? Because what's the purpose of it? And I think this is the beginning stages of all this. And people are going to start to realize that, yeah, we really don't need this whatsoever. We have other alternatives. So we can see that things are actually changing. And as this system comes down, people in many countries, people around the world, government leaders, they're all going to be looking at this saying, what is going to be the best for the people? And if the government officials don't do this, the people have to say what is going to be the best for the people and force those government